I stood outside the wrought iron gate of the house everyone believed no longer belonged to me. A moving truck idled at the curb. Through the front window I saw a thick stack of documents spread across the dining table my father had built by hand 30 years earlier. My younger brother reached for a pen while a sharply dressed stranger smiled across from him. They were seconds away from selling the home that had been left in my name. None of them knew I was alive. None of them expected the woman declared dead 18 months earlier to walk back through that gate. Before we begin, please like and subscribe. Now, get comfortable and enjoy. 18 months earlier, I boarded Flight 728 carrying a navy leather briefcase, a silver laptop, and a notebook filled with plans for a business expansion that had taken me 7 years to build. I kissed my husband Daniel goodbye at the departure gate. He wore the cedarwood cologne I had bought him for our anniversary. He hugged me just tightly enough to look convincing. Looking back, I realize he never once asked me to text after landing. 3 hours into the flight, everything changed. A violent jolt threw coffee across the aisle. Oxygen masks dropped. The cabin filled with terrified voices. The captain struggled to keep his words calm, but panic slipped through every sentence. Moments later, the aircraft disappeared into a storm that swallowed the sky. The official reports later called it a catastrophic ocean crash. The world accepted that explanation. I survived. I remembered icy water. I remembered clinging to twisted metal until rescue workers from a cargo vessel pulled me aboard before dawn. My passport had been ruined. My face was cut badly enough that I was barely recognizable. I drifted in and out of consciousness for days inside a small hospital on a foreign island. By the time I recovered enough to contact home, the news had already buried me. Memorial services had been held. Insurance claims had begun. My legal death certificate had already been filed through emergency procedures after every passenger was presumed lost. One phone call could have corrected everything. Instead, I made a decision that surprised even me. I stayed silent. Not because I wanted revenge. At least not then. Something felt wrong. Daniel had inherited a temporary control over our shared assets far too quickly. His first message after the accident, forwarded through the airline, sounded polished instead of devastated. Friends wrote that he seemed strangely composed during the funeral. Instinct whispered that returning immediately would only warn whoever was hiding the truth. So I disappeared completely. I accepted temporary work translating documents for an international logistics company while recovering. Every paycheck mattered. Every quiet evening gave me time to think. I rebuilt my strength, my confidence, and eventually my finances. I watched from thousands of miles away as tiny pieces of information about my old life slowly reached me through public records, social media, and business filings. The deeper I looked, the colder I became. The first clue appeared almost by accident. One evening, while reviewing public corporate filings, I noticed Daniel had resigned from his modest management position only 6 weeks after my memorial service. 2 months later, he became a silent partner in a property investment company that had never existed while I was alive. The initial capital contribution listed in the documents totaled $1,240,000. He had never possessed that kind of money. Not legally. I opened another record. Then another. The numbers lined up too neatly to ignore. The life insurance policy I had purchased years earlier had paid exactly $1,250,000 after my presumed death. The difference between the insurance payment and his investment matched attorney fees, taxes, and settlement costs almost perfectly. I stared at the screen without blinking. Daniel had transformed grief into capital. That alone did not prove wrongdoing. It proved opportunity. I needed evidence. Over the next several months, I built a quiet routine. I worked during the day and investigated every evening. Public databases became my closest allies. Property records, company registrations, court filings, archived interviews. Every document told a small part of a much larger story. The pattern kept growing. Daniel sold our apartment less than 4 months after the memorial service. He transferred nearly every family photograph into storage. He canceled my charitable foundation. He emptied my personal office without informing the board of directors. Then he moved into my childhood home. That house had never belonged to him. My parents had left it solely to me before they passed away. Their will was airtight. If I died without children, the property would remain inside a protected family trust until my legal status could be reviewed. Somehow, someone had convinced the probate court that extraordinary circumstances justified transferring temporary authority to my brother, Ethan. Ethan. The same brother I had paid through college. The same brother whose medical bills I covered after his motorcycle accident. The realization settled over me like ice. He had signed the paperwork. Not because he inherited the house. Because someone persuaded him to help sell it. I hired an attorney in the country where I was living. Her name was Victoria Alvarez. She never interrupted while I explained everything. When I finished, she folded her hands and asked only one question. Do you want your old life back, or do you want the truth? The truth, I answered immediately. She smiled for the first time. Good. The truth lasts longer. Victoria connected me with investigators experienced in financial fraud and international identity cases. They helped restore my legal identity through hospital records, immigration logs, rescue documentation, and DNA confirmation. Every document was certified, translated, and authenticated. The process took nearly 8 months. By the end, every government agency involved officially recognized that I was alive. We deliberately kept that information confidential until every legal requirement had been completed. Meanwhile, the investigators uncovered something I never expected. Daniel had not acted alone. Phone records revealed repeated contact with a real estate developer named Marcus Hale. Marcus had been trying to acquire my family's neighborhood for luxury redevelopment years before the crash. Several homeowners refused to sell, including me. Without my signature, the entire project had stalled. With me declared dead, everything suddenly moved forward. That coincidence was far too convenient. For the first time since the accident, anger threatened to replace patience. I refused to let it. Anger made mistakes. Evidence ended lives without raising its voice. Victoria insisted that every accusation be supported by documents no reasonable judge could dismiss. We created a timeline stretching across an entire conference room wall. Airline reports occupied one corner. Hospital records covered another. Bank transfers, property deeds, insurance payments, corporate filings, and notarized affidavits filled the remaining space. Red strings were unnecessary. The facts connected themselves. One transfer caught my attention immediately. 3 days after the insurance proceeds reached Daniel's account, he wired $280,000 to a consulting company owned by Marcus Hale's sister. The company employed only one person. It had no website, no office, and no measurable business activity. Within 48 hours, nearly the entire amount disappeared into 4 separate accounts spread across different states. Money had a habit of leaving footprints. Victoria obtained additional records through legal discovery requests tied to my restored identity. The consulting agreement was only 4 pages long. It promised strategic acquisition services without defining any actual work. The signature looked rushed. The date matched the week after my memorial service. The investigators kept digging. They interviewed neighbors who remembered unfamiliar luxury vehicles parked outside my childhood home long before anyone discussed selling it. One elderly neighbor had photographed license plates after becoming suspicious. Another had saved messages from Ethan asking everyone not to contact me if they somehow heard rumors that I had survived. He claimed false stories were circulating online and begged everyone to ignore them. There had never been any rumors. Someone had prepared for the impossible. That discovery changed everything. Daniel had not simply benefited from my presumed death. He had actively protected the lie. Every new fact sharpened my focus. I stopped asking why they had betrayed me. That answer no longer mattered. What mattered was proving exactly how they had done it. Months later, Victoria finally looked up from her laptop and nodded. "We're ready." I returned under my real name. No disguises. No dramatic announcements. No interviews. Only silence. I rented a modest apartment across town and spent the first week observing. Daniel now drove a black luxury SUV worth more than $100,000. Ethan wore expensive watches despite still claiming financial hardship. Marcus frequently visited the house carrying architectural plans. The sale was scheduled for Friday morning. Exactly 10 o'clock. The buyer had already transferred earnest money into escrow. Victoria smiled when she heard that. "Perfect timing," she said. The night before the closing, she filed emergency motions recognizing my legal status, freezing the property transaction, and notifying the title company that the recorded owner was alive. Court officers agreed to deliver the documents at the closing itself to prevent any attempt to conceal assets beforehand. I barely slept. Not because I was nervous. Because 18 months of unanswered questions were about to receive answers. Friday arrived. I parked across the street just before 10. The moving truck rolled into position. Workers carried furniture toward the sidewalk. Inside, I could see Daniel laughing with Marcus. Ethan held a fountain pen over the final documents while the buyer adjusted his glasses and reviewed the closing statement. No one looked toward the front gate. No one expected history to interrupt their celebration. I opened the gate slowly. Its familiar metal hinges produced the same quiet creak I remembered from childhood. Every head turned. The pen slipped from Ethan's fingers. Daniel's face lost every trace of color before a single word had been spoken. For several seconds, no one moved. The room seemed to forget how to breathe. Marcus recovered first. He forced a smile that looked painfully rehearsed and asked whether this was some kind of misunderstanding. Daniel stared at me as though he had seen a ghost climb out of the earth. Ethan backed away from the table until his legs struck the china cabinet my mother had polished every Sunday. I placed a slim leather folder on the dining table. "I think these belong with the closing documents." No one reached for it. Victoria entered behind me, followed by 2 court officers carrying sealed envelopes. The title company's attorney immediately stopped arranging the paperwork. One glance at the court seal erased every trace of confidence from his face. "What is this?" Marcus demanded. Victoria answered calmly. "An emergency court order recognizing the lawful owner of this property. The scheduled sale is suspended effective immediately." The silence that followed was almost satisfying. Daniel finally found his voice. "You were declared dead." "I was," I replied. "I never agreed to stay that way." His mouth opened again, but no explanation appeared. Victoria began placing certified copies across the table one by one. My hospital records. DNA confirmation. Immigration documentation. Government recognition of my restored legal identity. Every page carried official seals and signatures. The buyer slowly removed his glasses. "You told me ownership was uncontested." Marcus tried to interrupt. "It is a temporary complication." "No," Victoria said. "It is fraud." She slid another document forward. The bank transfer. Then another. The consulting agreement. Then photographs of Marcus meeting Daniel months before the insurance payment arrived. Finally, affidavits from investigators and neighbors establishing a clear timeline of coordination surrounding the attempted property acquisition. Marcus's confidence evaporated. Daniel looked toward Ethan. Ethan looked at the floor. Neither man spoke. The buyer stood quietly, collected his briefcase, and asked only one question. "Will my deposit be returned?" "It already has been frozen," the title attorney answered. He closed his file without another word and walked out. The moving crew received a phone call moments later. Their supervisor apologized politely before instructing everyone to reload the furniture they had removed. One by one, every box returned inside. Marcus suddenly exploded. He accused everyone else of incompetence. He blamed lawyers, banks, government agencies, and bad luck. His voice grew louder with every sentence until one of the court officers reminded him that anything he said could become part of an official record. That ended the shouting. Victoria wasn't finished. She presented evidence that several financial disclosures submitted during probate contained false statements under penalty of perjury. Insurance funds had been diverted into shell companies before reaching development accounts. Emails recovered through lawful discovery showed discussions about acquiring the neighborhood quickly before unexpected complications could arise. The phrase carried a terrible meaning now. Unexpected complications. That was me. Alive. Daniel finally whispered my name. Not with love. Not with relief. With fear. I never wanted this. I met his eyes. You signed every page. He lowered his head. For the first time since I had walked through the gate, I saw the weight of consequences settle onto every face around that table. No shouting could erase ink. No apology could rewrite bank records. No performance could convince anyone that this had all been an innocent mistake. The truth had arrived carrying certified copies. Within 2 weeks, the investigation expanded beyond the failed property sale. Financial regulators subpoenaed banking records connected to Marcus's development company. Insurance investigators reopened the settlement file that had been considered closed. Prosecutors questioned everyone who had signed affidavits during the probate proceedings. The story spread quietly through legal circles, not because of gossip, but because every document revealed another layer of deception. Daniel attempted to negotiate. He asked for a private meeting. I agreed only because Victoria insisted every conversation be recorded in the presence of attorneys. He looked older than I remembered. The expensive suit could not hide the exhaustion beneath his eyes. I made terrible decisions, he said softly. But I thought you were gone. You thought I would never come back, I answered. His silence confirmed the difference. He offered to surrender every remaining asset if I agreed not to pursue civil damages. He promised public apologies. He blamed Marcus for encouraging every financial decision after my memorial service. Victoria slid a folder toward him. Inside were copies of emails written entirely by Daniel. They detailed strategies for accelerating the insurance claim, liquidating my business interests, and convincing Ethan that selling the family home honored my memory. Marcus had participated, but Daniel had initiated the plan. His shoulders collapsed. There was nothing left to deny. Ethan apologized through tears. He admitted he had believed Daniel's explanations about mounting debts and urgent tax obligations. He confessed that greed had eventually replaced doubt. The promise of an early share of the sale proceeds had silenced every question he should have asked. I accepted his confession. I did not excuse it. The civil court restored every property right in my name. The fraudulent transfers became evidence supporting judgments that required the return of misappropriated funds wherever they could be traced. Several luxury vehicles, investment accounts, and development parcels were frozen pending final orders. Marcus's flagship redevelopment project unraveled after lenders withdrew financing. Within months, the mansion he had proudly displayed in magazines entered foreclosure. Daniel declared personal bankruptcy after the court entered judgment against him. His reputation vanished far faster than his wealth. Former business partners refused his calls. Recruiters quietly removed his name from consideration. The confidence he once wore so effortlessly disappeared each time another legal notice arrived. As for me, I restored my parents' home instead of selling it. The old oak floors were refinished. The leaking roof was repaired. The workshop behind the garden became a community space where aspiring entrepreneurs could receive free mentoring and practical business guidance. The house finally felt alive again. Sometimes I stood on the front porch at sunset, listening to children laugh in the neighborhood my parents had loved. I no longer wondered what might have happened if the plane had landed safely. That life had ended long ago. The one I built afterward belonged entirely to me. Peace arrived quietly. Not with revenge. With truth. If you found this story compelling, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel for more stories like this. Let me know in the comments what you would have done.